Could the legitimacy of Britain's sovereignty over Australia be fundamentally flawed? To answer that, we need to take a journey back in time, starting from the year 1770, when Lieutenant James Cook arrived on the eastern coast of Australia. Cook, in his capacity as a mere lieutenant, boldly declared the land for Britain, waving the Union Jack and taking possession in the name of King George III. 18 years later, Captain Arthur Phillip established the first British settlement at Sydney Cove. However, the basis of these actions raises significant legal questions. To justify their sovereignty over Australia, Britain relied on two main legal fictions. Firstly, they declared Australia as terra nullius, or uninhabited lands belonging to no one. Secondly, they believed that symbolic ceremonies, such as the waving of a flag, fulfilled the requirements for obtaining sovereignty under international law. But both these premises were fundamentally flawed. The terra nullius claim was directly contradicted by the documentation of the time. In 1606, Dutch explorer Willem Jan Zoon landed on the western Australian coast. His journals described trading with the indigenous inhabitants and mapping over 300 kilometers of coastline. This evidence clearly proves that Europeans knew Australia was inhabited, effectively dismissing the terra nullius claim. Further evidence comes from the 15th century, nearly 300 years before the British arrived. The books 1421 and 1434 present extensive evidence of Chinese exploration, trade, and interaction with Aboriginal Australian populations. This fact reiterates the point that Australia's Aboriginal inhabitants maintained sovereign control and foreign trade connections long before the British set foot on the continent. Considering the factual and legal deficiencies that underpin Britain's claim over Australia, one could argue that the ancient common law principle of ex dolo malo non oritur actio should apply. This principle states that no rights can arise from fraudulent acts. Therefore, any rights, privileges, or obligations stemming from these illicit acts should be considered null and void. In conclusion, the British acquisition and settlement of Australia was based on premises that were legally and factually untenable. The terra nullius claim and the symbolic acts of claiming sovereignty were in direct contradiction to the established rights of the Aboriginal nations. Therefore, by the principle of ex dolo malo non oritur actio, Britain's sovereignty over Australia can be considered void from the outset.